Guys, Toolman Tim here. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. It is March the 3rd, 2022. It's episode 77 of the Workshop Podcast, and this is our 13th in our ongoing series of Repairedness. I got to figure that out so it's not so damn confusing. But tonight, we're going to talk about automotive preparedness and 17 skills you might want to learn. But first, what do we always have? Announcements. So, first off, I've been plugging the heck out of this, but I love it. Drop by Telegram. So, and guess what? Hang on. There we go. Let's try this again, guys. Audio is probably a little low on that little first start. So, Telegram. If you're not over there, stop by and check it out. Grab the link from the description below and come by and join us. I think we got like 55 members over there, and it's a great place to swap out experience and just tips and tricks and everything. And honestly, just keep up as a community. I love it. It's nice to hear what people are up to. Our buddy from the Philippines there, Mike, he just posted a picture of a big project he's working on, and it's absolutely great to see. So number 2, I tried, you know what do they say? Go big or go home. Well, I'm not going home anytime soon, although I'm already at home. But if you guys didn't catch it on YouTube this afternoon, it all started yesterday. We did an impromptu, I was on Unloose the Goose, and we did an impromptu after-hours party. I don't know what you want to call it. And it was a lot of fun with Brian, John Dowie, myself. Anyway, we got talking about things we wanted to do, and I made it abundantly clear, as I have before, that my goal is to have Mike Rowe on the show. So I decided to put together an absolutely foolish 35-second video trying to, convince him to come on the show. So first off, if you don't mind, everyone who's listening, in the description of wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, I put the link to the 30-second YouTube video. Do me a favor, share that on social, and use the hashtag DoMeDirtyMike. I realized afterwards that it spells Dome Dirty Mike, which is weird and makes no sense. But just do that for me. I'm sure we'll make a connection out there. Just imagine how incredible it would be. I've always wanted to have a chat with that man, and I would love to sit down and just pick his brain. That's it. I just want to hear him tell his story, ask him a few things, and we'll get him on. We will have him on this podcast, hopefully sooner rather than later. And number 3, if you guys aren't following, or if you're not over on PBN at all, Prepper Broadcast Network, the content coming out over there is awesome. We just broke a record for the amount of views in a month, I believe it was, and it's awesome. So what did you miss this week? Well, the Matter of Facts guys had a fellow Canuck on there talking about the trucker convoys. It was a really good episode. James, he had Preppers Live this week with Rick Austin from Prepper Camp. A really cool dude. I didn't know a whole lot about him before I joined PBN, but man, he's got quite the thing going on there. Ryan and Colin, they did the Next Generation podcast this week of Victory Gardens, and Dave Jones had 2 or 3 of the daily audio caches, all about nuclear, biological, that kind of stuff. And I didn't put this in my notes this week, but you guys, pretty much everybody knows I'm going to be in Nashville, the Nashville area, Tennessee, for Nicole's Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop in April. But I just booked a flight and a ticket. I'm going to Prepper Camp in North Carolina in September to meet up with a bunch of the Prepper Broadcast Network, some of my buddies there. But also, if anyone else is out there and listening and wants to meet up, feel free. I would love that. I've never been to North Carolina before, so we'll see how it goes. So, we're going to dive right in. So, yes, Martinson family. Hello. Who all do we have tonight? We got Chris Dixon. We got Brian from the Lots Project. Amy, nice to see you from Farmer's Kind of Life. The Martinson family. I can now call you Ashley and Kevin because I'm not sure which one is which, but that's okay. Good evening. Nice to have you here, guys, fellow Canadians. So, we're going to dive into automotive preparedness tonight. So, I didn't even know what direction to go with this. There's so much to talk about in the realm of, automotive preparedness. So I guess the first thing is to make sure, hey, we got the Philippine nomad, Mike, from over on Float. He's in here as well. He says, a big shout out from the highlands of northern Luzon. And I really hope I pronounced that right. And Chris Dixon says, I'm going to love North Carolina. So, okay. So first off, Preventative maintenance, I talk about it all the time, but with automotive is absolutely key. I spent a lot of years not doing any preventative maintenance on my vehicles, and I paid a hefty price for it over the years. And sometimes, preventative maintenance costs a little bit of money, and it's hard to wrap our head around it all the time. But hey, John Palmer, once you get that mindset around, and of course it's hard to quantify too, right? Because doing regular oil changes will probably save you from having a seized up engine eventually, but it's hard to say when that would have happened or when it wouldn't have. But again, we're all about the odds here. We're all about preparing for the most obvious and the most likely scenarios. So that's why we're going to deal with automotive preparedness. So if you've never done anything at all on vehicles, start small. Work your way up, little things like filling up your washer fluid or, and Chris Dixon says crisis management is way more expensive. Yes, because if we wait until it has to be done, then we didn't choose when it was done. And it ended up, it could end up costing you more. You don't know. I know one time Becky and I, we had a noise in we had a Dodge Neon, had a funny noise in the front. We pulled into a store one time, went to back out, and we couldn't turn one of our tires because our tie rod had snapped off. And yes, Brian says changing the blinker fluid is easy, although if you've never done it before, check your owner's manual to make sure you know what type of blinker fluid you use. Some have specific left and right blinker fluid, so be careful. And if anybody missed that, that's a joke. So like I said, learn small skills and work your way up. Get comfortable with the little things like, say, fill in your washer fluid, or, if you want to live high, learn how to change out windshield wiper blades. And that is one of those things that's a little more tricky than you might think. So a few quick little tips we're gonna go into. I got like 17 skills we're going to talk about. Then I got a whole bunch of random tips we're going to talk about bug out bags and just a few other quick things. There isn't as much there as you might think. Oh boy, everybody's got their dad jokes tonight. So if you're looking, whatever it is, whether you're looking to start small, medium, or large in automotive preparedness, and that's, doing shit yourself, take it easy, break it down into small bites, take pictures as you go. Don't be like my uncle, who is an incredible diesel mechanic, but he's self-taught, and whenever he did marine jobs, and he'd go right down into the, where the engine is in the boats, and he would just start ripping and tearing. He's like, oh, I found the problem, but then never paid any attention to how he hauled any of his parts out, went to put everything back together, and of course it takes him 3 times as long and 12 times as many cuss words because he didn't pay attention to how he took it all apart. You get better with that with time, but just saying, right? Cooking to survive. Oh boy. Says, don't forget to add some sugar to remove water from your fuel. Oh boy. Cold temperatures are on the way. Yes, that's important too, right? So when I was 17, this is just one of those simple things. And actually, part of this episode came from a post on social media that Amy posted the other day. She talked about how she had to go rescue her son on the side of the road because he didn't have a jack for a spare tire. And that was exactly... Oh, and Amy says she identifies as a mom, but she can still make dad jokes. So that was exactly what happened to me. When I was 17, I borrowed the car to go hang out with some friends, and I ended up going to hop back in the car. We were way out in the country, and I had a flat tire. And you know what? I didn't know how to change a tire. I was completely lost. That's all there was to it. I was just lost. And so I called my dad, panicking. He's like, don't worry, I'll come up and give you a hand. So this is kind of a funny story, but he drove out there. It was probably 15, 20 minutes with the other vehicle. He got there and he says, all right, time for you to learn. He says, jack up the car. We did everything. I went to pull the tire off. The damn thing would not budge. I thought, well, what did I do wrong? Did I leave a lug nut on? I don't know. Dad's like, I just, he couldn't figure it out either, so I didn't feel so bad. So we ended up calling the same uncle that is a ripping and tearing kind of guy. He had to come out with a heating torch and a little 3-pound short-handled sledgehammer. And what had happened is over the years, the tire, because we probably hadn't rotated them like we should have, the little spindle on the inside had kind of mushroomed just a little bit and made the tire damn near impossible to take off. So I wouldn't have... How do you want to put it? I wouldn't have been able to do it even if I knew how to do it. So I didn't feel that bad. And hello, Farm Hop Life. Nice to have you here. A few new faces. We got a good crowd already. And Cooking to Survive. I think I've seen you in here before, but nice to have you guys. Um, so yeah, it still sucked. I felt bad because I couldn't believe I didn't know how to change a tire, but that was on my own doing. I just never gave a shit about that kind of stuff at that age. Even though Dad tried to teach me, I was just too smart for my own good, right? And, and then there was one time, this would have been I don't know, one of the few times before I moved out. I was probably 17, 18. Again, bored Mom and Dad's car, went for a drive about an hour out of town. We went down to the theater to watch a movie. And I was parked on a hill like this, and I was parked over a crosswalk or a sidewalk or whatever. Crosswalk, that's the one. And so somebody was coming across, and I'm like, oh crap, I'll back up. And I back up without looking in my mirror, and I backed up right into this big French guy, huge French guy. He gets out of the car, and I thought, oh my God. And he looks at his bumper, looks at my bumper. They're both good. Taps me on the chest and says, have a good day, buddy. So I felt good. But what I didn't know was that when I bumped him, my serpentine belt, the drive belt on the car, must have been something a little bit wrong with it. Well, it slipped off and shredded or something. So I'm driving along, and all of a sudden the car stalls. And I stop, and I'm like, this is weird. I've got no power. Battery's dead. Okay. So I stop, and of course didn't have any booster cables. So this is basically what not to do as a prepper, right? So I stopped and I asked this lady, I'm like, hey, do you have any booster cables? Would you mind giving me a boost? She said, well, I have them, but I don't know how to boost you. I said, oh, I know how to do that. I thought it did anyway. So I was hooking everything up, and I accidentally touched the red and black together, and sparks flew everywhere. But I did boost my car, got it started, and it shut down after a minute or two because, of course, alternator wasn't working, the whole works, wasn't charging the battery. So... be prepared, pay attention, know those kind of things. I know I was young and I really didn't have a whole lot, but there's no excuse. I should have known these things. So we ended up spending the night in a town that was just far enough away that I didn't want to get Mom and Dad to come and get us. And then we got it fixed. And yeah, so those were some of my dumb-ass vehicle stories that maybe if I'd have known just a little bit more, maybe I wouldn't have been, I don't know, in such a bad way, right? Okay, so first off, we'll get this out of the way. Automotive bug out bag. So, or automotive emergency bag, whatever you want. But a few things, I just jotted down a few things to put together. I have a kit that I keep down in the back of my truck. There's actually not a lot of storage in these Ram 1500s. It drives me crazy. But there are 2 floor compartments that if you're careful, you can jam a bunch of stuff down in there. But I got some edibles. And if Brian's on here, I don't mean like mushrooms or anything. I mean like trail mix or granola bars or protein bars. Basically for me, I need something that I could still eat if it's absolutely freezing outside. And, Philippine says, Dad, all his brothers, and most of my older guy cousins were midnight mechanics wrenching at home. And a few cousins became pros in the military in dealerships around town. So he had some experience, and it's good to have. We'll talk about that too. Water. So then the issue, I have a few bottles of water down in the bottom of the car. Again, they want to freeze when it gets winter here, and that sucks. The best set of booster cables you can buy, get yourself a set of those. I like at least a 20 to 25 footer because what that allows you to do is pull up behind somebody on the highway or whatever to boost them, hook up your cables, and have your vehicle in the back with your 4-way flashers on so that people can see you when you're doing it. Just an idea. And at least 1 gauge, something nice and thick. From there, power pack. So I keep like a little, I got to get a booster pack. The one that Amy recommended looks really good. Right now I just have a charger, but I have a power pack for my, phone and that kind of thing. So keep that down in there. And then we keep a pair of underwear and socks for each family member. We don't have any, we don't have room to keep full sets of clothes, but if you got clean underwear and clean socks, you're going to feel a lot better than not having any. Yes, and Brian says the edibles in the kit might make being stuck for a while a bit more pleasurable. And even just granola bars would, but I know where Brian's going with that. We also we have a grab and go bag that if there's an emergency, we grab it in the house. But if we're away from home or like literal shit hits the fan and we got to run, we got 5 days of prescriptions in the car as well. Just something to think about. Tire plug kit. We're going to talk about that later on. If you've never used one, they are absolutely worth having. Oh, Cooking to Survive says, yes, this is important. Extra gloves and winter hat are always helpful as well. Yeah, especially Now, I know some of you, there's a few on here that would live down further south that it doesn't get that cold. You still need, it's all relative, right? But up here, when we're getting ready to take long trips in the wintertime, I always make sure everybody, even if I'm driving with shoes on, I make sure my winter boots go in the back, an extra pair of pants, an extra coat, whatever it is. But you want to make sure you have extra layers, because you don't just dress for the drive, you dress for the fact that you could slide off the road and be stuck in a snowbank, because it happens. I got stuck this winter going around checking my properties for the bank, which was fine. It was a nice day. I dug myself out. And Brian says they keep extra bibs and boots. Yeah, and the thing is, like, that's one thing I do miss about when we always had a Grand Caravan when the kids were younger. There is storage space galore in those things. They're just so nice. And trucks, we've got the crew cab, and there's just no space in them. And then they put this nice new, like, folding bar or whatever. It kind of makes everything flat. And yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. But I love the truck, but it's tough. There's, you have to be careful with how much storage you have. And I put a tow strap in there. I didn't put that on my list, but I bought a tow strap this year, and I had to fight to find space for it. An extra jug of windshield washer fluid, also important. Then we keep a bar of soap, a little bit of cash, and some floss. And the floss is simply because I don't know how many times I've been driving, and I'm like, man, I got something caught in my teeth. But I mean, floss is always good, but I just keep them on there, right? So, and I'm sure you guys can think of 100 other things, and I didn't want to like harp on this, because this is more for the maintenance side of things. But I couldn't talk about automotive without talking about having an emergency kit in there. And John says, dress for the slide, not the ride. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking when I said it. But I was like, well, I'm not driving a motorcycle, right? Okay, so next thing, and this is, it's something I do on a fairly regular basis, not as often as I probably should, but especially if you have new drivers in your family, giving them a routine maintenance checklist. And I don't mean like things to fix, but just 3 or 4 things a few things to check every time. Because again, when we're doing troubleshooting, we use our ears. If we hear something, we know something's wrong. Something sounds out of the ordinary, right? And this works. We talk about this in Repairedness all the time, using our senses to troubleshoot. So first, you listen. If something sounds wrong, shut it down. Use your nose. If something smells, how about burning rubber or an electrical fire or a sweet smell? Well, you might have a belt that's slipping. You might have, a fuse issue, or you might have coolant leaking, that kind of stuff. So, pay attention. And then, of course, the first line of defense is your eyes. So maybe once a month or once a week, or, if you're new every time, just take a walk around your vehicle. You're going to inspect your tires. So you're going to walk around, just look at them, say, okay, well, there's nothing stuck in it. There's not a homeless guy sleeping behind my tire. I'm not missing my tires because I parked in a bad neighborhood. But, all kidding aside, take a quick run around, look at your tires. Make sure one of them's not flat. Now, I know most vehicles now have that sensor, but a lot of the older ones didn't. Inspect your wiper blades. This is something that has got me off guard a few times, to the point where I'm going to start keeping an extra wiper blade in my car or in my truck, because you get driving along on the highway and it starts raining. You never thought anything of it. And all of a sudden you turn your wiper blades on and you get scratch because the rubber's completely worn off. Or better yet, how about I jumped into my backup work truck one day and there was no windshield wipers on either side. My son had drove it. It had got frozen and both windshield wipers had tore off. And he never told me. So yeah, is what it is, right? That's where inspections come in handy. Then know how to check your fluids, right? Washer fluid's the simple one. Then you get your brake fluid. And of course, if you're not comfortable with it, haul out your owner's manual, watch a video on YouTube, or talk to someone else, and it was neat because a couple weeks ago, or last week, I did the generator, the generator for beginners. And Crystal, she said, she was a single mom, and I got thinking, I need to do these videos and these things for everybody. And I always say, oh, well, get somebody, to help you. Well, some people just don't know anybody to get help with. So there's other ways. Like I said, your owner's manual, YouTube videos, that kind of stuff. And then just peek around, make sure your vehicle's off and the keys aren't in the ignition. And then first off, learn how to open your damn hood. Like, I know this is simple, but, with all this stuff, guys, this is all like vehicle maintenance 101. And I got to say, vehicles are all over the place with the hood release. John says he's glad he doesn't have kids. I understand. The hood release mechanism, they're all over the place. And the last 2 old trucks I bought took me like 3 minutes to find the latch because they're in a weird spot. So first off, know how to do that. Just say, for instance, you have to pull over because there's smoke coming out from under your hood, and you panic and you don't know how to open your hood and the car burns down or whatever, right? So it's good to know that kind of stuff before you get started. So know where that is. Then lift up your hood. Next thing you want to know is know where that arm is to support the hood up, because you don't want that falling down. A lot of them are weighted so that you can just drop them and they'll shut, from a couple of inches out. So you don't want that hitting you in the head. And then just poke around and look, and you'll see all these different caps, and you'll see power steering fluid, which you want to check. Brake fluid, you want to check. Washer fluid, you want to check. Know how to check your oil. So I usually keep some old napkins in the car. Not used napkins, but napkins in the car. So pull it out, wipe it off, stick it back in, and then pull it back out. And then be careful, because those little hash marks, they're so hard to read. So practice doing this kind of stuff at home when there's not an issue. Because when you've done all of this on a regular basis, then when you're stressed out or there's an anxious situation where you're like, geez, I don't know, am I leaking oil? And then you might be like, I don't know how to read my dipstick. And then you call yourself a dipstick because you didn't know how to read your dipstick. So do all this stuff ahead of time. Now, here's one more for you, though. Your coolant. If you want to check your coolant, don't ever open it when the car's hot. That happened to my daughter's friend a couple of years ago. My daughter was having trouble, and her friend was like, oh, I know cars. And she went right in. It was hot, and opened up the rad cap and got a whole face full of hot fluid and had to go to the doctor. It wasn't anything permanent, but it was bad. Chris says, you'll be surprised that if you ask, the place that changes your oil will be more than happy to help you. Most parts stores will come out and answer, yes, that is absolutely right. And that goes for things like windshield wipers. We'll talk about a little bit too. But yeah, those guys are there to help you. And that's a really good tip, Chris. So yeah, if there's no one else, if you have no one else around, yeah, go to a place, like you said, and they will. Most people work at those places because they're friendly and they have customer service, and if they don't, well, they're probably not going to be doing it for a long time, right? But yeah, or for very long, I should say. And then here's another one that not a lot of people think about, but inspect all your lighting system, because, I always tell my kids, don't break 2 laws at once. I don't know if that's really good advice or not, but in other words, don't attract unwanted attention. And, say for instance, you didn't know your insurance was, you didn't have your up-to-date insurance card or whatever. Well, if you have a burnout headlight, taillight, blinker, whatever it is, that's going to be reason for a cop to pull you over. So check those ahead of time so that you don't give them a reason to do it. We used to do that in the oil patch all the time. Once you hooked up the trailer, you walked around to make sure the trailer lights were working, because that's one that'll get you a DOT ticket, and that's not something you want. So then everybody seems to love my lists. I try not to make them too long or in-depth, but I got thinking, hey, there's James in here tonight. He says, I know that Chris Dixon guy. Nice to have you, sir, from the Prepper Broadcast Network. So gear to purchase. And this isn't stuff you have to have, but all these items are things that have made my life easier. Because I got to tell you, 8.5 years ago when I first moved to Alberta, I really knew sweet jack shit about anything automotive. Really, I didn't. Like, my brother-in-law's a mechanic, and I have picked his brain so much, like to the point where I barely even washed my vehicle because I didn't realize even that the importance of having a clean vehicle, right? But over the years, I've started picking up a lot of automotive gear, stuff that's made my life easy. And, I'll bring this up. I should bring this over for you guys. But Philippine Nomad said that he witnessed the hot coolant volcano radiator blowout when I was a kid. Happened at my uncle's house, and he burned himself bad. Yes, be careful. We got people everywhere here tonight. Yeah, it's it's really good. Just be careful, because she had to get some special cream and stuff for her face. It wasn't permanent, but it really can be. John says, use a building with a glass front to check lights. Yes, that's great. Or here's another one. What I used to do is check your lights before it's daylight out. So if you're backed up to a building, press your brake key, or your what is wrong with being nice? Sorry guys, press your brake pedal and you can see if the lights come on. Turn your signal on, you can see if it reflects. But John, that is a great tip. Everybody remember that one. We got to, yeah. So I want to come up with a way to remember when somebody says something really good. There's what is it, Brad? I can't remember anyway. He's a business podcaster, and he comes up and he's like dropping bombs, and he makes like an explosion sound or something. But John, that's a great tip. I love that. Really, really good. Okay, so stuff that I've bought over the years. Like I call it an automotive lift jack. So number one, if you want to get into like rotating your own tires or anything like that, or even doing your own oil change, one of the best things to have to start out with is one of those heavy duty lift jacks, I call it. And it looks like something you'd see on NASCAR. They got the long handle and you put it under and you can crank up your vehicle a lot easier and a lot safer than you can ever do with them stupid little T-handled jacks that you're going to get if you're even lucky enough to get a spare kit in your vehicle, right? So, also, jack stands. So once you have the vehicle jacked up, you want to have something permanent or stable in there, because even though you might think, yeah, I know that jack won't fail me, you never know if some kid's going to come by and crank the handle a quarter turn to the left and drop it down on you. Torque wrench. So if you're getting into rotating your own tires, and you're like, well, Tim, I can go to the garage. Well, sure you can. But you know what? Doing the work yourself, you're going to get a chance to get up close and inspect your tires. You're going to learn more about your vehicle. Maybe you want to learn how to inspect your brake pads. So if you do, something I didn't realize for a long time, but tires need to be torqued to a certain, not PSI, but to a certain pounds anyway. So learn how to use a torque wrench. Buy yourself one. You can get them. Now, we have Princess Auto up here, but I'm sure Harbor Freight sells them for not a whole lot of money. I got mine for less than $30, and it's a great big 1/2-inch drive one. And then get yourself a little standoff adapter, because otherwise it's really hard to get those in close to your tire. Get an oil filter wrench that fits the size of your oil filter if you're going to do your own oil changes. I mean, I don't know. For me, it's almost not worth the price to do my own oil changes when I go through the drive-through ones and they're that cheap. But for a long time, we used to do them. So if you're going to, make sure you have an oil filter wrench. Get yourself a good set of funnels, stuff, because you're always pouring fluid and different things around. Here's another one that not a lot of people think about, a hand-powered suction tool. So what it looks like is basically a caulking gun with a pull handle on the top and a long piece of rubber hose that you could beat somebody with on there. And so it's really good for getting like down into those little reservoirs. And if you want to suck the last of the fluid out of there, they're absolutely great for that. And they're dirt cheap, like a lot of times $10. I've bought 2 at yard sales over the last few years for like $2 a piece. So just keep an eye out for that. And again, yard sales and Brian's favorite estate sales are great for this kind of stuff, because it's hard to justify spending a whole bunch of money on something that you're only going to use a couple of times a year. But if you can get it cheap and it's going to save you money, then go for it. Absolutely. Okay, what else do we have? And then, okay, also people are always like, well, what do you keep on hand in the shop, Tim? And I'm going to do a whole video or maybe a whole episode on just the fluids that I keep in my shop. But, brake fluid, power steering fluid, oil, an oil filter, some coolant. Keep all of that around. And if you have room, get I want to say individual servings, but you don't want to be drinking that. But, get kind of the individual bottle sizes and throw one of each, especially if you've got an old vehicle, throw one of each under your back seat. That's what I've got with my daughter's truck, because the thing is getting old. And Chris says, if you purchased wheel locks for security or your new car came with them, make sure you know what it... Oh, Chris, that is a great thing. So not everybody knows about these, but a lot of newer vehicles are coming with them, especially if you have decent rims. My truck came with it. And so one of the lug nuts has a really weird profile on it. And the only way to take it off is with the matching key that you put onto a socket, onto a breaker bar or whatever. So you have to have that in order to remove it so people can't steal your tires. So make sure you know how to use them. That very good tip, Chris. That's awesome. Cooking to Survive says those pumps you mentioned are great for small engine oil changes as well. Never tip your push mower to drain the oil again. Yes, and I do use them for that, and they are great. Just used it for doing my snowblower the other day. I changed out the belts on it, give it an oil change, and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, those are awesome because you want to get as much of that old oil out of there because that's what keeps, if there's any metal filings in there or just, you don't want to go and contaminate the brand new oil with, half an ounce or 2 ounces of shitty old oil that's still in there, right? What else do you want to have? Extra fuses, especially if you tend to burn up fuses quite a bit. Those are always just something to have. I noticed the newer vehicles don't seem to burn through them quite as often. I'm sure there's reasons for that, but it is what it is. Valve stem tool, and if you guys haven't used one of these, those are great. So, and this might be something you don't even know about, but my brother-in-law gave me a good tire pressure gauge. You need to have one of those so you can, again, people are like, oh, well, there's a chip on my computer in my car that'll tell me. But if you don't, you need to know what the pressure is for your valves, for your tires. And if you don't know where to find that, of course, first thing I'll say is in the manual. But if you open up your driver's side door, so if you have your door open, what somebody from behind your car looking up toward your car would see, look at it, and there's a sticker on there, and quite often your VIN number is going to be there, but it's going to tell you the torque that you need to torque your vehicle tires down, and it's going to give you your air pressure as well. And I see Silver Streak over on PBN. Hello, Silver Streak. We got people. It's getting to the point where we got people everywhere to talk to. This is great, guys. Okay, so a valve stem tool. When you take off, Brian says that. Oh, yes, they are. They can be fun. So when you take off the little cap, right? And in there, the valve stem, there's that little brass pin that if you push down, the air comes out. Well, that's really slow. So if you ever need to, either fill or empty a tire really quick, there's this little thing that looks like a little screwdriver, and it just goes in there, and you can back the valve stem off, and then all the air will come out really quick. They're handy to have, especially if you're into like patching your own tires and that kind of stuff. It's absolutely great. And Silver Streak over on the PBN says those valve stem sensors go bad and are expensive to replace. Yes. So, okay. There's a few things you can do. You can buy them generic. I don't even know if I'm going to get through everything tonight, guys. We might have to split this into 2 episodes, but you can get generic ones, or you can program your vehicle, look it up on YouTube to overlook that one sensor so that it's not always giving you a bad reading in your vehicle. So just one of those things. Wheel chock. So if you're doing your own work, again, okay, if you're going to do an oil change, you either need to jack the car up and put it on jack stands, or you need to get those weird little ramps, which I hate driving up on. So again, practice doing it, because here's another story for you, because you guys love my stories. I was pulling the vehicle up onto a ramp one time. I was probably in my early 20s, and it was a little slippery, so I gave it a little too much gas, and I drove right up and over and right down so that my wheels were over and the car was sitting on the ramps. So then, of course, I had to use my vehicle jack and jack it up and pull anyway, so just be careful. But car ramps can be great if you're doing your own oil changes, but again, have wheel chocks. Everybody's like, well, I set my emergency brake. Yeah, well, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Well, 3 is a guarantee. So if you have the vehicle turned off, you have your parking brake engaged and wheel chocks, then you're going to be able to crawl your ass out underneath of the vehicle without ever hurting yourself, right? So yes, and we have Are You Feeling Lucky is in chat over on the EOC, which is for Purple Broadcast as well. What else? Plug kit. Have a plug kit. Have a battery charger. If you don't know how to charge your vehicle's battery, learn how to do it. And this is one other thing. I'm sure some of you car guys know these, but a lot of people don't. A Chilton manual. So Chilton is like the gold standard for car repair manuals. I have them for all my older vehicles, and they're great because they're like, as thick as a New York City phone book. And anybody under the age of 20, if you're listening, you probably aren't. You're like, what the hell's a phone book? But anyway, they're great. They're just like page by page breakdown of every maintenance task and part replacement you can do for those vehicles. John says, I lifted my Jeep so I can fit under it. That's a great idea. Absolutely. Yes. And so what do we got? Okay. So here we go. 17 skills to learn. So we're going to go through, I probably won't spend a whole lot of time on any one of them. Again, we're going to a lot of these, we're going to probably be a whole year going through all the first kind of basic repairedness stuff, but all this is the high points. And these are all things, remember, every skill you learn is one thing that you now know, right? So when you're heading into automotive stuff, don't get overwhelmed. Like, I eventually learned how to do my own brakes, front and back, so brake pads and drums, and they're really difficult. They just are. But it wasn't something I did overnight. I learned how to do a whole bunch of other stuff first. So start small and work your way up. So number one, and probably all 17 of these are things you can teach, up and coming drivers, young family members, just so they're a little more empowered. Because again, I don't blame my parents. I blame me, because I just was a stubborn ass bugger who just didn't want to learn things. But if you have a kid who's getting ready to drive, make some of this stuff part of their, driver's ed, whether they're homeschooled or out there doing it. So number one, learn how to change a tire. Everybody's going to say, well, I know how to change a tire. Well, if you do, great. But here's a few things. If you've never done it before, have your kid or, your significant other, whoever's learning how to do it, have them do it in front of you when there's no stress on, right? Because if people say, well, I know how to change a tire, well, they might be able to muddle through at home in their own driveway with all their tools. But what happens if you have a flat on the side of the interstate at 3 o'clock in the morning and it's raining out? Can you still do it? Also, what happens if your spare's flat? So make sure you check your spare. Also, know where your spare is. Know if you even have a spare. And if you do, know how to get them down. Because I don't know if it was all my different caravans, but I know I had one that you had to lift up the trunk, then lift up a floor panel, and then there was like a crank in there. It was the most miserable thing. And then you had to lift the tire up and then fish the wire out through it. So know how to do all this stuff before. Brian's been looking at my notes again. So Brian, you can share this for me. Crack the lug nuts before you jack it up. And if anybody's like, well, why would you do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons, but number one, well, it's a safety thing. Plus you can get a lot more you can get a lot more torque on the wrench when you're trying to break them off, right? Oh yes, and Silver Streak. Somehow I missed that on my, so Silver Streak said get an OB2 diagnostic code reader for when that check engine light comes on. And if you're like, what the hell's that? All it is, if you can plug in a USB or a serial port to a computer, you can use it. It used to be those things were damn expensive, and now you can get them dirt cheap on Amazon. So if you're like, hey, you know what? I got an old vehicle and my engine light comes on all the time. Grab yourself one of those diagnostic code readers, and at least it can tell you what the problem is, so that when you take it to a mechanic, they're not going to hose you for it. But yeah, so back to cracking the lug nuts before you jack it up. Number one, you're going to be able to put more pressure on it. And number two, when you get the tire up, there's a good chance it's going to want to spin when you're cranking on it. And say it doesn't want to do that, well, you can end up rolling it off the jack, because those stupid little jacks are not made to hold anything. They're just there to hold the vehicle about 3 seconds longer than they need to. That's it. So yes, crack the lug nuts before you jack the vehicle up. And then teach everybody in your family how to change tire. So maybe make an afternoon of it, like some Sunday afternoon, be like, okay guys, we're going to go out and do it. And that's what I did with my daughter, Olivia. I took her out and I'm like, hey, we need to rotate the tires. You're going to do everything. I'm going to sit here and drink a Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi, and I'm going to watch you do it. And she did it. And now she knows how to do that kind of stuff. And, oh, I didn't know this. This is good, guys. Brian says they will let you use a code reader at a lot of the auto parts stores. Of course they will, because then, you might just buy the parts from them. That makes great sense. I always forget about that. Thanks, Brian. That's good. Okay, number two, know how to rotate your tires. Now, a lot of people are like, why do I rotate my tires? I've never rotated my tires. Well, it's important that, vehicles always wear slightly different. Even if you have the best balance and the best alignment, there's a good chance that your tires are going to wear a little bit more. And then your drive tires are going to put a little more pressure on than your non-drive tires are. So if you regularly rotate your tires, you're going to get a longer life and save yourself some money on your set of tires. Now, when you do this, inspect them all, because you might be like, tires might look good on the outside, but when you take them off, you look on the inside and you got some wear. So oh, okay, so now I got something really weird going on, whatever it happens to be. Also, rotate them. So one time you want to rotate front to back, then the next time side to side, then you want to do the crisscross pattern. Just do that so that you're always kind of keeping them in a different pattern, but keep track of what you're doing. Chris Dixon says, Innova makes a great, easy-to-use scanner, and it's updatable, and they're less than $100. That's good. And then Martinson Family says, put a pipe that fits your... Oh, this is good, too. Put a pipe that fits your 4-way lug wrench in case smaller family need the leverage. Yes. So some of them are like a crowbar, just like an L shape. Those are a little better, but you could still put a snipe on it. That's what we call it in Alberta. I don't know, an extension pipe anyway. But those stupid little 4-way lug wrenches, they're great for spinning quickly, but they're not great for getting a lot of torque. Even, me, absolutely. John says he rotates his tires while he's driving. Oh, but on bump. That's the dad joke of the evening, guys. So, know how to change your oil. That's number 3. This is something that some people overlook, or they pay somebody else to do it. And if you want to, great. But you can save some money doing it. We used to ignore the fact that we needed an oil change. I don't know, again, if it was our abject poverty or we just didn't want to admit the fact that we'd have to spend some money. But our old little Dodge Neon, the very next day my wife was supposed to take a trip to Ontario, which would have been basically 24 hours of driving. We pulled into our driveway, and just as we do, the oil light comes on. I thought, well, that's strange. And I looked down under the car, and the oil's just gushing out. And I thought, what in the hell is going on? And I knew nothing. So I called my father-in-law, and he came out. Hey, Dan, nice to have you in here. So my father-in-law come out. We jacked up the vehicle, and it had been so long, I know you're Joe, since I'd done an oil change, that a rock had hit the oil filter, put a dent in it, cracked the paint off it, got rusty, and eventually rusted through. I'm not proud of it. I tell you guys all these things, so that you don't do what we did before, right? So yeah, know how to change your oil. Get comfortable on your back, laying down, cussing, and getting a mouthful of oil, that kind of stuff. And one thing I always do is I give my vehicle a nudge before I go under there. So, because I want to know that everything's sturdy. I'd rather the vehicle flip over onto the jack while I'm out from under it. Now, I'm a big guy, so I can do it, but I just want to be comfortable and know, hey, if one of my kids is running around and they bump into the vehicle, then I'm going to be able to, it's not going to fall over, right? So just do that kind of stuff. Practice driving up on the ramps. We're not going to dig into doing oil changes. There's lots of videos on it. Maybe we'll do a whole nother on this kind of thing. Know how to check your air pressure. These are simple little things, but if you have an air pressure gauge, and that's something I didn't know how to really use properly, and if you don't get it seated properly, you won't get a good reading. So if you're not really sure, maybe get yourself a digital one. But basically, you just take the cap off, you push it down, and then it slides out, and you get this little scale that'll tell you what the air pressure is. But just know how to do that kind of stuff. And like I said, if you don't know what your air pressure should be, it's on the door. Flip it open. It's going to be on the sticker right there, the piece that you see on the narrow part. Another skill that's really good to have is how to plug a tire. Now, this isn't for everybody, and this is something I've taught myself over the last 3 or 4 years. I had a tire plug kit in my car for about 4 years before that. Never did it before, which was so stupid because, what do they say? Like a gun without ammo or a tool without knowing how to use it. Why do you even have it? And that's exactly how it is with a tire plug. You don't want to be doing that for the first time on the side of the road, in a hailstorm, on the highway, whatever, right? Because you just don't. So practice ahead of time. Practice with the tire off. Practice with the tire on. If you can do it, it's great. What's cool about plugging a tire with a tire plug kit is a lot of times you can do it and not lose a lot of air, because the only time the air is really coming out is when you pull the nail out of the tire. Now, compact cars are a little harder to do. Rear tires are harder to do than front tires, because at least with a front tire, you can turn hard one way and it puts the tire out so you can work on it. Whereas a lot of those little compact rear wheels, you've only got maybe 6 inches to work on. So if you're not sure, take the tire off, plug it, but take your time and learn how to do that. Learn how to check all your fluids and how to top them up. A lot of times you might think, oh, I know where this goes. And then you go to pour the water in. You're like, oh, no, maybe that's the coolant instead of the windshield washer fluid. That's pretty common, right? So just know where things are. Know how to read your dipstick. I know we talked about that before. Know where each reservoir is located. Know what kind of funnel you're going to need. And then, like I said, keep the appropriate fluids, because the worst thing would be in the middle of the road or the middle of the night and not having the fluid you need and not being able to drive to get somewhere, right? This is why we do this stuff. Preventative maintenance, what is it? Prevention is preparedness, and preparedness is prevention. We do a little bit of this ahead of time. Invest a little bit of money up front, have a little emergency kit and some supplies on hand, and we're going to be 95% better than your average Joe out there. Philippine Nomad over on Float says, practice preventative maintenance, PPM. Don't be a GNG guy or gal. Gas, no go. I had a vehicle like that one time. And Brian says, I used to fall asleep under the car to get a few hours away from the ex-wife. She thought an oil change took 6 hours. Well, maybe it does at some dealerships. I don't know, but yeah. Now, this is another one. Know how to change your windshield wipers. And you might think, well, that's not a preparedness issue. Well, yeah, it is, because if you're on the highway and you lose a windshield wiper, well, number one, most windshield wipers, well, all windshield wipers are basically universal, or at least there's a couple different clip systems, but most wipers, when you buy them, come with those pieces in there. Now, some vehicles, the left and right wipers are different lengths. A lot of vehicles now are the same size. But in a pinch, say your driver's side windshield wiper flies off, well, if you can't get anywhere, take your passenger side one off, put it on your driver's side, and then put some tape or a sock. If you take one of your socks off, put it over the metal bar so that at least you can see to get yourself to safety. That's something you don't always think about, right? Dan says, my wife just asked about her tire plug kit, and I'm not sure if it's still in the car. I'm adding that to my monthly checklist to make sure that it's still there. Yeah, it's just simple, right? We make ourselves a checklist so that we know the things that we might forget once in a while, right? And that's why we keep updating these checklists. We update these maintenance lists. Make yourself these little lists so that you have something to go by. Because sometimes otherwise we get blind to it. We're like, oh yeah, that's there. And then you go to look and, oh shit, it's not there, right? So know how to charge your battery. Everybody's like, oh, I know how to do that. Well, maybe you do. And if you do, that's great. But if you don't, get yourself a smart charger if you can. Those things are great. I actually found, it was like a $100 smart charger on the side of the highway one day. I was driving, I'm like, that looks like a battery charger. I do a U-turn in the highway, go back and look. Yeah, sure enough, it was. So I brought it home and it worked perfect. So I have 2 battery chargers, but know how to hook them up, know how to run them. Hopefully if you have a smart one, it's going to do all that for you. But if not, you want to know, hey, it's a 12-volt battery. You want to know if it's lead acid or gel or glass mat. We won't get into all that, but you just need to know that kind of stuff when you're hooking up the charger, right? And yeah, just know. And then another one, know how to boost your vehicle. We talked about that a bit before, but hook up to the dead vehicle first. Not everybody's going to want to even boost for you, because some people are nervous that it could end up hurting their vehicle, right? So know how to hook up your booster cables, hook up to the dead vehicle first, then hook up to your vehicle, then maybe rev up a little bit if you want, and then, let the other vehicle start, and then reverse the process coming back. Now, here's another thing. Before you ever do these kind of things, know how to hook up to your battery, because my daughter, her battery was hidden way down in a weird compartment, and if you ever had to boost the vehicle, it had these weird, posts up where you could access them. So know about that kind of stuff ahead of time. And Chris says, take those measurements and write them in the owner's manual if you still have one. Yeah, talking about windshield wipers, I'm guessing. And also, Brian says, never assume the battery is dead. Yes, that is true too, because you can get yourself into some serious trouble. But don't ever touch your booster cables together when they're hooked up to a battery. You could inadvertently weld the cables together. You can you can burn out a battery. You can cause an explosion. But when you go to, also, here's something not a lot of people think of either. Because like Brian said, don't assume a battery's dead. Maybe it's just weak, but there's still some juice in it. So what people do is they go and hook up the batteries, the clamps to the so-called dead battery, and they never paid attention to where they left the other clamps behind, right? So then all of a sudden they hook it up and they're like, shit, those two are touching and they're sparking and flying on the ground and maybe you got some gas, who knows, right? So just pay attention to that kind of thing because again, now a little hack that I learned from a guy in the oil patch, when you put your booster cables away, if the jaw is thick enough, you can take one jaw and stick it to the insulated wire below the other one, as long as it's not going to put undue pressure. That way the two can never touch, so that even if they're dangling in the dirt somewhere, they're not going to be able to short each other out. It was a really good thing. He did it in the patch because he didn't have to buy the cables, but I do it with mine because the teeth are big enough they're not going to chew into the wire. Here's another one. Know how to change your air filter. And that's kind of simple, but it's something that you may not always have known about. Have an extra one on hand. Know how to blow them out, because it can affect your fuel mileage. It can affect a lot of things. Some vehicles, of course, either they'll start or they'll limp around because if they don't have proper airflow, the computer says, haha, you can't drive. So know how to take it out, know how to service it, all of that, right? Dan says, there are also people that clamp the booster cables to the insulated wire and they bite in and fireworks. Yes, that can happen too. Here's another one for you guys. Know how to change out a light bulb. Whether it's a signal bulb or a headlight bulb, that kind of thing. And when you're changing them, change them in pairs, because if not, you can end up having, you look like somebody with like a cataract in one eye. You're driving down the road and one bulb is light and one bulb is bright, and you're like, oh, okay, we got something weird going on here, right? So whenever you change out headlights, signal lights aren't such a big deal, but change them in pairs. And then again, watch a video ahead of time so that you know how to change the light bulbs, because they're always like a puzzle. You got to hold your tongue right. You got to twist this the right way, unhook this wire, but just be careful because there's usually a lot of plastic and you can end up just breaking something that isn't easily repairable, because for whatever reason, they make a lot of that shit in vehicles out of plastic. Now, here's another one for you. Oh, we have Flawless Farm over on Float. If anybody can see, let me know how many people are streaming over there tonight. They said if cable ends touch and start sparking, disconnect from the battery. Don't try separating the sparking ends. That is a great tip, Flawless Farm. I love that, because yes, you could end up hurting yourself as well. Let's bring this up and see if that'll show up for you guys. Yeah, so Flawless Farm said that. I'll bring it up so you guys can have it in the live stream there. Here's another one that you may not think about, and it was never an issue before, but know how to change your cabin filter. So if you're like, what the hell's a cabin filter? I don't mean like a bug out location. I mean, if you've been driving along and your vehicle has smelled like a wet dog, there's a good chance either, your cabin filter got wet or it's dirty, or better yet, if you're driving along in the heat and you're like, that air's cold, but I'm just not getting a lot of flow. There's probably a good chance your cabin filter, especially if you do a lot of driving on dirt roads. So in most Dodges, the cabin filter is behind the glove box. So Dan says, what the hell is a cabin filter? Well, I didn't know this either until I started driving Dodges, and maybe it's mainly a Dodge thing. But again, if you have bad flow in your air conditioner, or if your vehicle kind of stinks like wet dog or kind of stale smell, it's probably in there. So 2 things you can do. Number 1, you want to open up your glove box, and then what you're going to see is there's 2 flaps on either side. You're going to push those in, and the glove box is going to fall down. Like the lid wants to come off, but there's going to be a catch wire there. So unhook that. When that flops down, in there is a pleated paper filter. And that is what filters all the air coming in that you breathe, the cycled air. So haul it out. If it's dirty and you're in a pinch and you don't have one to replace, but you're not getting enough cold air, haul it out, let your vehicle run, and if you're getting a lot more cold air, just keep driving until you can get yourself a cabin filter. But that's something that a lot of people don't know about, and it's worth getting. And it's also one of those big upcharges. Since 1994, Chris Dixon says, but even still, not every vehicle has them. Yes. And if you're like driving a Tesla, they are, radioactive and chemical preventative. So you can actually sit in there and the filters will actually filter out all that stuff if you're driving, so you can drive through like a forest fire with no issues. So that's kind of cool. Know how to clean up an oil and gas spill. So now, if you're at a gas station and you accidentally overfill your vehicle, like Olivia did one time, so I picked her up at the airport. I think she was 15 maybe at the time. We were driving home. She says, "Dad, can I fuel up the car?" I said, "Sure." She'd done it 100 times. Well, I'm in there getting ready to pay. I'm picking up some snacks or whatever, and I can see her on the security camera in the background. And all of a sudden, I see her panic, and I look, and she'd pulled the nozzle out, and you could see gas just spraying everywhere, like some kind of comedy movie. And so I hollered to the guy, and I said, "Hit!" And he turned off the emergency switch. And I went out and asked her, and she said, "Well, I heard the click that it went off." Well, it was the guy behind her. He was sharing a pump. His clicked out. She never thought, just grabbed it and pulled it out because dumb teenager. I shouldn't have let her do it anyway. So we had to drive the rest of the way home with her just reeking of gas. So know how to clean that stuff up. And in a pinch at home, you can use kitty litter or sawdust. I'm sure other people have suggestions, or you can buy actual absorbent. So, if you're doing work for a vehicle, park on a flat, say cement surface, so it's easier to clean up. Put a drop cloth down, or better yet, save yourself 2 or 3 cardboard boxes, break them down, slide them under, and go from there. But know how to do that kind of stuff. And then brake clean, if you guys have never used brake cleaner before, it is some of the best. It cleans everything up. I love the stuff. It's so good. I used it the other day to clean up my friction wheel inside my snowblower. So they're basically a rubber wheel that runs against a metal wheel, and it leaves some residue. You got to clean it off, but you can't leave any material on there. Otherwise, it'll slip. So brake cleaner's awesome. Know where the fuse panel is. Know how to change a fuse. Again, something not everybody knows. So long before you're going for your first, cross-country trip, know where your fuse panels are. A lot of times there's 2 of them. So a lot of times there's one in the cabin and there's one under the hood. So know where they are. Now, a lot of them too will have a little fuse puller tool in it. And a lot of times you can tell, sometimes you can't, if one of them's bad. But if you need to replace one, use the fuse puller tool to pull it out. And sometimes you'll be lucky enough that there'll be extra fuses in the panel. They'll say spare fuse or whatever, and you can use it, right? So just pay attention, know where that is. And when you lift the lid off, or you take the cover off in the cabin, a lot of times there's going to be a diagram there. So if you say, your driver's side tail light isn't working, but you've changed the bulb and it's still not working, well, it's probably a bad fuse. So then you go in, open up the fuse panel, and look at it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, right there. I know where it is. Find it, and then replace the fuse. That's all there is to it. And a lot of this stuff, if we do it once ahead of time, then we know how to do it, right? Chris says, I've been there too. The auto shutoff didn't go off, and me playing on my phone ran about 5 gallons on the ground at the card lock. Yep. And then Cooking to Survive says, don't get it on the paint. I think you're probably talking about brake clean there. You might be talking about gas. I'm not sure. But either way, neither of which is good to get on paint for sure. Here's another one for you guys. There's a couple things that we'll talk about trailers. Know how to hook a trailer up. Again, when I started in the oil patch, I got to tell you, a lot of this stuff I've learned in the last decade. I don't think I had hooked up a trailer a few times before, but I didn't know the process for it. Take your time. Ask somebody if you need to. Check your lights. Remember, once you get it hooked up, walk all the way around. Set your 4-ways. Some vehicles, the 4-ways and the blinkers are on the same circuit, and some they're not. So check them both out. Don't jam your fingers in those little spring-loaded things. Martinson family says, know where your fuel cutoff is and how to deal with it. Absolutely. Get comfortable when we're talking about trailers. Like I said, test your lights. Make sure that your wire isn't hanging down. For a few years, I did that a couple of times, and I'd get home, and one of my lights wouldn't work, and I'd look at my wire, and it had a nice, beautiful flat spot on the bottom of it where I drug it for 100 miles on the highway and wore off the rubber. So my brother-in-law put this new stuff on there for me. It's like a rock-hard asphalt coating. It's supposed to help, but I've been much more careful since. And here's another one that everybody's like, I can't do this. Learn how to back up a trailer. It's important. If you're going to drive with a trailer, you might as well learn how to back up a trailer. You might as well learn how to be careful with it and do it. It just takes some time. The best thing to do, what I did, was I went to a big empty parking lot, and I set up, I don't know, trash cans or pylons or whatever, and just practice. And don't practice with anyone else. You don't want your wife or your husband or your best friend's brother standing out there yelling at you, cut it the other way, cut it. It doesn't do you any good. Just learn on your own and then do it. And when you think you've mastered it, do it some more. A short trailer is harder to back up than a long trailer. Nobody believes me, but it's absolutely true. I can back up a 53-foot trailer like nothing, and my short little 8-foot utility trailer can be a pain in the ass sometimes. Never be scared. Never be too proud to stop, pull ahead, and back up again. All the best drivers do it. Don't worry about it. Make small adjustments. Pay attention while you're doing it. Use your mirrors. Look over your shoulder. Whatever it takes. But just take your time, and then you'll get there. And then, of course, with trailers, know how to secure a load. Not simply, that ain't going to go nowhere. That kind of stuff. Just know how to use a ratchet strap. And again, maybe I'll do a video on this because I didn't know how to use a ratchet strap before I started in the oil patch 8.5 years ago. Or I kind of knew, but I didn't really. Like if it was all set up perfectly and I hooked it up, I could probably ratchet something down. But if anything got out of whack on the ratchet strap, I didn't know what to do with it. So pay attention, know where the safe places are to tie things down. There's a bunch of different things, but you want to know ahead of time because sometimes, like on my little trailer, what I thought was a tie down wasn't. And so as I started to bring it down, everything kind of sucked in a little bit. Brian says, yes, this is absolutely 100% true. If you want to know how strong your marriage is, ask your wife to help you back up your travel trailer. Then you'll know. Becky and I have been in different situations where we've been at campgrounds where we've watched other families do it. Oh my God, you'd think they were going to kill each other. So yes, Brian, you are right. If you want to find out how much you love your wife or your wife loves you, just have her help you back up a travel trailer. And Amy, smiley faces from Amy. Flawless Farm over on Float says, if you blow a critical fuse, yes. Oh, this is a great tip, guys. I'm going to bring this one over for you too. So if you end up burning a critical fuse and you don't have one to spare, let's bring it up here. Steal one from a non-critical circuit like the radio or the seat heaters. That is great. That is a farmer's mentality. Make do because you can't do without. So figure out a way to do it. Make it work. Sit there for a minute. Again, one of my keys to troubleshooting is take a breath. Stop. Let the emotions go. Don't be mad. Don't be scared. Don't be anxious. Let it pass and then come up with a solution. Because you have to. You're not going to sit there all day. That's a great one, Flawless. Thank you very much. And like I said, know how to secure a load. Know what to do with a ratchet strap when it's all done. Oh, Brian says Corey drives. Okay, well, that works too. And Chris says, and make sure you twang it twice and say, that ain't going nowhere. That is the key. So when you're done securing a load, make sure that you twang it and maybe even slap the load and say, that ain't going nowhere. And then when you're pulling down the highway and you lose it, you're like, but I did it. Why did it fall off? But know how to do it. Practice with ratchet straps. Get ratchet straps you're comfortable with. Inspect your ratchet straps. If you're not into commercial stuff, you're not going to get pulled over and asked to look at the certification on it. But just know what you're comfortable with. That's the big thing, right? When it comes down to that. Because if you grab a new ratchet strap, it might work just a little bit different. And you're like, well, what the hell? I thought I had it. And then it ends up sliding off on you. So just pay attention to that kind of stuff. So I think, guys, I had, you know what? I'm going to save. Yeah, we're never, ever going to make it through everything tonight. So, I'm telling you, we've been on a roll lately. I will save these for another episode in a few weeks. If you guys have other tips or other skills or other maintenances that you might want to bring up at this point, just bring them up in the comments. We'll talk about them. And then one more thing I'll touch on real quick was some intermediate skills. So that first batch of skills was all something that basically anybody can do with almost no tools at all, or very few. And I made a list of 4 more that you might consider once you've gotten comfortable with stuff, but not right away. Changing spark plugs. Now, if it's a spark plug in a lawnmower or a wood splitter or a tiller, I'd say, yeah, anybody can do that. But changing them in a vehicle nowadays, if any of you guys have lifted up the hood to a vehicle in the last, 15 years, like my Dodge Ram from 2000, I think there's room enough for me to get in there and lay down under the hood. And my new one, my, 3.5-year-old nephew, there's not enough room to go in there and lay down. So to change spark plugs nowadays, you almost need to go to a mechanic, because they're in weird spots. And thank you, Jason Davis says, love what you're doing, Tim. I appreciate that. So, but if you want to tackle it, it is doable. Just pay attention. Changing out your drive belt, that's another one. Again, that's an intermediate task, something you might look at down the road, and it might be something you want to tackle because, hey, why the hell not, right? Brake pads, especially, brake pads. That front brakes tend to be brake pads. A lot of vehicles have them front and back now, but they're a lot easier to do than drum brakes in my limited experience. And then flushing your coolant. Google it. Maybe I'll put together another playlist of different YouTube videos showing how to do a lot of this stuff. But those are just 4 that you might consider tackling if you've worked yourself through all those other things. Thanks, Flawless Farm says, great show, Tim. Have a good night. Appreciate it, Flawless. So yeah, that's a bunch. And I had, 21 random tips. We'll do that for another show, guys. That'll be great. We'll even talk about some post-apocalyptic transportation. So if you guys think if you've got some suggestions for post-apocalyptic transportation, maybe we'll turn that into its own show too. And one more thing I wanted to mention. When I was researching this, I found this great article. If you guys have ever heard of the website, The Art of Manliness, there are some incredible skills that you can learn from that website. But this one was called 10 Tips for Tackling Your First Major DIY Automotive Repair. And it was just 10 tips on how to keep it simple. So I will, if I think of it, I will throw that up in the link in the description as well tonight, guys. This is good, Chris. He said, most places will also have a place to bring your fluids for recycling if you keep them separated. Yes. Or if you just mix them all in with the oil and call it used motor oil. Not that I would ever do that, I'm just saying. But parts and mechanic shops too. Yeah. Something else, if you're ever into casting your own your own ammo and stuff, you used to be able to get the wheel weights a lot. A lot of places will keep them in buckets and you can buy them for so much, but it's getting harder and harder to find real lead. Something else to think about. But yes, a lot of mechanic shops will take your used fluids if they're separated, for sure. But yeah, check out that Art of Manliness article. I will really try to remember to get it in there for you. It's really simple stuff. I wanted to go over it piece by piece, but I thought, you know what? They've already done it. It's something else we can check on. So yeah, I think that is where we will end her for tonight, guys. So what do we got coming up this week? Man, there's a lot. This has been a busy, incredible week. If you missed it, guys, and you want to see something totally different, thanks, James. I appreciate it, my friend. Last night, I was lucky enough to be on the Unloose the Goose podcast. The guest was having a lot of just issues with their internet, right? So the show didn't go great, and it ended up ending, and we're like, well, what do we do now? So I said, well, let's go over. We went over to my channel, and we did a crazy live stream, 2 hours. There was a lot of F-bombs, so just be wary. But if you want to check out something different, it was just 4 guys shooting the shit, talking about movies, comedy, football, entrepreneurship, the works. I threw it up on my, it was actually in the podcast film feed, and we're probably going to end up, I don't know, maybe turning it into a monthly show on its own channel and everything. But frig, it was fun. We had a blast. If Brian's still in here, we had too much fun. This Sunday, I have Dave Jones, the NBC guy, another alum from Prepper Broadcast Network. He is going to be coming over. We're going to talk about, I don't know, it was just whatever it was, but he's coming by to talk about building bomb shelters. I've always wanted to have one. I don't have one. I'd love to have one, but I had booked him like 6 weeks ago before all the bullshit that's going on now. So it'll be fun. He is an expert with decades of military experience dealing with nuclear, biological, and chemical. So if that's your shtick, drop by, check it out. What else? Next Thursday, we have yet another installment of Repairedness. Haven't exactly decided what the topic will be, but it'll be every bit as full of misinformation as this one. No, I'm just kidding. Every bit as full of information as this one was, for sure. Let's see. So that covers Sunday. Yeah. And then next week also, Fireside Freedom. It's a group podcast that I know quite a bit about. Because I'm part of it. And we're going to talk about death and dying and preparedness. It's going to be really, really weird. Anyway, so yeah, it's going to be cool. I thought this is going to be an odd topic, but I really wanted to get in on that episode because it was something I just don't want to talk about. So it was good. John threw up another tip here, really good one. Grab an old carpet from trash collection and lay on it. Yeah. And then if you spill oil on it, whatever. Yeah. You know what I mean? So just good to have. Good knowledge to have. And then, okay, guys. Yeah, I think last thing, if you want to keep hearing, and I love this, if you want to keep hearing top quality preparedness content on PBN, please drop by and subscribe. I'm sure James said that I'm sure February was the biggest viewership month for the channel ever. And March, 3 days in, is already on par to eclipse that mark, which is so exciting. I love being part of the Prepper Broadcast Network. So if you haven't checked it out yet, hit the subscribe button in your podcatcher. You'll get all of it. But tomorrow, my buddy Carl, A.D. Brown, is coming on, and it's the Strange Truth. This is the name of his podcast, and he talks about everything. News, Christianity, and a bunch of stories that nobody else wants to touch. So, guys, that is it for me this week. I tell you guys this every week, and I do mean it because, frig, I love doing this. This is too much fun, but I know that you guys only have the same amount of time in a week that I have, and you're willing to come and hang out in the workshop. And you know what? I appreciate it. And also, don't forget to spam Mike Rowe. We're going to get him on the show, I promise. I have to do it. It's just what I want to do. I've wanted to talk to that man for a lot of years. So anyway, guys, as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.
Are you prepared to be the family doctor in a disaster or emergency? This is the Intrepid Commander, and I'm holding the Prepper's Medical Handbook by William W. Forgy, M.D. In this great book, you'll learn how to prepare for medical care off the grid. You'll learn about assessment and stabilization. You'll even deal with things like bioterrorism response, radiation, and how to build the off-grid medical kit at home. Look, 2020 taught us a lot about the limitations of our medical infrastructure in America. Get the Prepper's Medical Handbook today at Amazon.com. Again, that's the Prepper's Medical Handbook by William W. Forgy. Let's talk about your Prepper's Library. The Prepper's Guide to Surviving Pandemics, Bioterrorism, and Infectious Disease is Dr. William W. Forgy's latest. If you want to know about the history of pandemics, herd immunity, the lockdown debate, how to prepare for bioterrorism, and infectious disease, you have to get yourself a copy of the Prepper's Guide to Surviving Pandemics, Bioterrorism, and Infectious Disease. Go to PrepperBroadcasting.com, click the banner ad up top. Do yourself a favor, PBN family. Put a copy of the Prepper's Guide to Surviving Pandemics, Bioterrorism, and Infectious Disease in your home library today.
Thank you for listening to the Prepper Broadcasting Network, where we promote self-reliance and independence. Tune in tomorrow for another great show and visit us at PrepperBroadcasting.com.